It has been a minute. What up, gang? I have been so busy lately. We had a big launch at Crunchy this week, and the work that I had to do going into it meant that I had to take the pedal off the metal, so to speak, of some of these like extra fun things that I do. But as I said, they're fun, so I'm back, and I'm back with a guest. Today with me is going to be John Rudolph Drexler. He is a co-owner of Thunk. If you don't know what Thunk is an agency. They specialize in building Laravel software in Laravel and also in product management. John specifically has like a very unique and talented skill set in product management. Lots of opinions there, as well as lots of opinions on game design. He creates board games and like video games as well. But he's just an all-around great guy, and this chat was fantastic. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Without further ado, let's get into it. This is episode 12 of Strong Opinions Weekly Held. Let's do it! Alrighty. We're here today with John Drexler.
Hello,
great
Will.
to have you on. You told me before you got on, you went from not knowing anything about this podcast to telling me that you had an entire note filled with opinions. So I'm very excited to get going today.
What am I looking at? I'm looking at I think I'm looking at like 11 hot takes.
Oh, 11. That's fantastic. I have a couple of questions as well that I think we'll be able to maybe tease some more out of you, but I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, you invite me to create a new notes file about strong opinions loosely held, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the podcast I'm meant to be on.
I got that. So I listened to your episode of Everything is Interesting a couple days ago, and then I have recently fallen down the rabbit hole of Talking Businessly. So I know that you and Daniel are not shy in opinions that you hold, and also not shy with being like, that was a dumb opinion later, which is like my favorite quality.
That's gonna be one of mine coming up. That's a tease that for later.
There we go. All right, so why don't let's do it this way. I've got like some questions myself, but I don't want to start out with like my questions. They will, I imagine, just naturally fall in at some point. So let's start with just from that list, since you came in with a great list. What is like one from the list that you were excited to share and talk about?
Well, yeah, I guess the one that we just teased is not necessarily on one that I'm excited about. But so I won't start there. I'll start with this maybe. I'll say that I learned a while ago that I should spend, how to say this. I want to spend like 10 times as much time shipping as I want to spend commentating on things. And I realized this when it was like in like 2016, there was like the internet was ablaze. And I found myself like drinking from the fire hose of just like, I need to know everyone's angry take about everything, and I need to have an angry take about everything. And I like spun myself into a frenzy and became very unhappy. And I actually at the time deleted Twitter and Facebook, and I like didn't log into Instagram for like 4 years, and was like, I resolved just like, I'm going to come back when I have something to share. And went out at that time and like got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and game design, and like decided like I'm going to do whatever it takes to become a product manager. And I will log back in when it's time for me to say like, hey guys, I've done something that I want to share. 'Cause I didn't want my whole online experience to just be like yelling with other people who were yelling.
Right.
And I am now once again on the precipice of that. Okay. I've been drafting angry tweets and not pressing send tweet for like a while now. And
Okay.
like that's something that's like I'm mostly saying it to myself because I hate it when other people are like yell at people about that, like especially from
Hmm.
online. If I'm gonna like get on Twitter and be like, hey everybody, you should be like just tweeting about stuff you're shipping and nothing else, like whatever, I don't care what anyone else tweets about, but I'm yelling at myself about this because I am like, once again, I feel the siren song of being like more noise on the internet, and
Hmm.
I'm like, forget this. I want to make games and I want to make software, and
Right.
the only thing I want to talk about is like, hey guys, look what I made. Are you excited with me?
Yeah.
You know,
Like,
and
let's talk
hey,
about
look
the
at that
thing
thing
that I
you
just
made.
did, and you tell
Yeah.
me things that you've made that like this made you
Yes.
think of.
Yes. And I love
Totally.
following
Okay.
those people too, who just like
Yeah.
have
Okay.
something. They're like, I made a
What
thing.
triggers? So you mentioned 2016, then you mentioned this year. There may or may not be something in common with both of those in those years that may have triggered that. Is it like,
Yeah.
is it related to like the political not necessarily, like, we don't have to dive into like politics per
Yeah.
se, but is it like just like in this time period people tend to be more vocal about opinions due to like the flux of what's going on in like personal lives in their, like, in the country, that kind of thing? Or do you think it's like stuff unrelated to that, and you just think like people get into these like phases of just like talking to talk?
I think it. I mean, I definitely think the election cycle is like a big thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't. I mean, it's not even really that I don't want to bury my head in the sand about it.
Right.
It's just like it's not what I want to. It's not really what I want to spend. Like
Yeah.
presidential politics are not something that I really want to spend a lot of my personal life thinking about. But I'm very susceptible to it, and also, frankly, I'm just like angry, and I'm not just sort of like angry like at Republicans, although like I am not a Republican and I am angry at Republicans. I'm like angry at
Right.
everybody.
Right. Right. Right.
Like
Right. Right.
I'm like I'm so mad, and it is like unbelievable. The reason that I like lead with this, that I'm like I is because it's so front of mind for me, is not because I have like become the Buddha and I've escaped the conversation and I'm like no longer
Mm-hmm.
mad. It's like because I am such a tinderbox about it, and like
Right.
it is
It's like your defense mechanism for it.
yeah, it's so easy to draw me in, and I can get into this like kind of arrogant position of being like, actually I know why everyone's wrong. It's like nobody needs that take. I also am
Right.
wrong about that. I don't know why everyone's wrong. And so like
Mm-hmm.
I guess part of it is like I don't want to contribute sparks to everybody else's tinderbox. I also like the more angry posting I do, the angrier I become, and then I'm like,
Right.
I don't know. I'm either arguing with people or like sitting in an echo chamber or whatever, and it's just like I guess the way that I said it to somebody the other day, because I think the internet also gets really really frothy around Trump, and
Right.
whether pro or anti, he just makes headlines, and then he creates 10 million tweets about those headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just absolutely determined that as I look back, I'm 34 right now.
Yeah.
When I'm 38, I do not want to look back and say, yeah, I spent a huge portion of those 4 years just like foaming at the mouth, being mad, reading minute to minute tweets about this stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I would love to look back at this time and be like, yeah, I made a lot of stuff and I was kind to the people around me.
Yep. Friend of the pod, friend of ours, Aaron Francis, wrote a fantastic article about this, which is just the like, if you cannot influence, then you just need to not worry about it. Basically, like there's a world in which you have influence over, and the way to be depressed or a way to just be angry without a solution is to try to influence things you have no control over. And
Yeah.
like you're saying, like presidential politics, you have a vote, but you do not have influence. So, like,
Yeah, right.
getting angry and upset about it is just going to cause you heartache in the long term.
it's
Not
the-
that you shouldn't, like you mentioned, like not that you should bury your head in the sand, not that you shouldn't form your own opinions about it or think about it personally, but I think too, like, one opinion that I have about these kind of things, because I'm sure I differ in a lot of my beliefs and a lot of my opinions on things from people, But like the internet is not the place to have those conversations. It's like in person where you can like actually understand the other person's point of view, because like when it comes down to it, like in one sense both of y'all really want the same thing. You just have a different point of view and how you're trying to get to it. And if you just give the other person that understanding, then like you can have a profitable conversation out of it, even if you continue to disagree, because you know that the person doesn't like hate you when they're talking about that kind of stuff. But like on the internet, it's like impossible not to feel like it's because like you don't get to have that one-on-one moment, because as soon as the conversation starts, like especially like you mentioned with like anything related to Trump or politics or that kind of stuff, like it just seems like everyone piles in and things get heated, and there's no way to unheat things once they are going.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at also like ties into what I think is the antidote for a lot of this stuff, which is like go smaller and go more like local, and go into like be kind to your family, be kind to your literal neighbors, like be a good parent, be a good citizen, be, you know, like help out at the local library, you know, like that type of local, you know.
If everybody's doing that, then
yeah, if you really want to like get into politics, like go understand what's happening at City Hall, or you know, and like that kind of stuff, because I think that's, you have actually quite a bit more influence there, and the odds of you making a difference are much higher, just volunteering and being a good neighbor, and being a good parent and that kind of stuff. So, and in some ways, I'm like that's where the real virtue is. And part of that for me is like my favorite thing to do with the people around me is make stuff. And that's a very like friend focused, community focused thing for me. So part of the antidote to all of this is just like, I want to be kind of done commentating and just be like someone who is like kind and makes stuff, you know?
Yes. I feel the same way. And I go through, so like, I'm constantly building stuff, but just because I'm building something doesn't mean I have formulated an opinion about something yet. And so I have a blog and I have like a personal site, and I used to like feel bad that I would write a bunch of stuff and then I'd stop for a really long time, because I'm like, you got to be consistent. Like you got to be putting out content on a regular basis if you want to like gather attention and be able to like build anything of worth from your content. And the more I do that, the more I realize like, no, because like my best content comes when I'm inspired by something that I've done to trigger some sort of opinion, or like I'm going to make up a word here. Synthesization. A moment where I need to like synthesize something that's triggered in my mind, and I need to process that. And like that's when I go to writing. Is like I need to process something that that just clicked for me because I was doing. And now I have something to share, something to say, because like I've now done the work of like doing it, synthesizing it, and now I'm going to try and like share that to you. And like I don't mind putting out content that's like mine and being like, hey, like I would love for you to read this at that point, because it's not like this hand wavy thought leader type content. It's like, no, like, hey, I did this thing, and like this is something that I feel as a result of that. Like, do you feel that too? Or like, does this help you crystallize something that you've been feeling? So like a lot of my content went from being like guides of like, here's how to do this, to like, hey, I've been through this process of like feeling creative drain. Here's how I learned how to like create new things and not just more of the same things. And like, this is how that worked for me, like stuff like that. So like that clicks with me a lot, where it's just like, you need to be doing, not just saying.
It's so funny that you said that, because I've been trying to speak more, and like there's two things that I've been like trying to actively do more of, which is speak, and then if I have something that's like that I think is like a really crystallized, good, helpful thought, I'll try to make like a little 1-minute video. And I've done each of these things like I've done each of these things like twice ever. And I was talking to somebody the other day who was like, man, I really enjoyed those. Like, you should start making like a video a week. You should start talking all the time.
No.
I was like, dog, like that. The reason that 1-minute video was good was because that was a thought that crystallized over 8 years.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I don't have 50
so
of those
true.
a year.
No,
like I have like
no.
2 of
and
those
you
a
shouldn't.
year.
My
like,
goodness.
yeah.
Like, there is something that is like floating around in my head with you saying that, which is just like, like if you think about like a lot of content creators, like you get this nowadays. It's known, like nowadays it is like, this is the pattern that you should do if you want to find success as like a creator of some content, which is like you pick a thing and you hammer on that thing until you are known as the person for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what it's known as now. But like I have this like idea that like that probably just started because of the thing that you and I are talking about right now, where it's like people who created content probably really just started creating content on a single thing because that's the only thing that they felt so strongly about to do that consistently.
Right.
And I noticed that like a lot of my work and a lot of the things that I talk to others about related to that is generally like the same type thing. Like it may have like a different angle on it, or it may have like a different like take for their context, but it really falls within this like Venn diagram of like these topics that I just feel very passionately about, even if that might just be like slightly different for like the context that I'm in. And it's like, that's now known as like a content marketing like strategy. But I think it just comes from like a deeper place of like, that's how you actually get experts. Like that's actually how you get people who can like create content worth listening to.
Yeah, I think that's right. It reminds me also of this is such a random. I want to find the actual name of it. I think it's called the engineering method. There's this great YouTube channel, and maybe that's just a common term. I should have done my research before bringing this up, but
no worries, no research needed.
Perfect. There's this like idea out there that I find really interesting, which is that a lot of the like mathematical breakthroughs and scientific breakthroughs that we've had did not come from academics. They came from just like engineers who were like doing stuff in the field, or like people like stonemasons who had apprentices, a chain of apprentices over like 4,000 years, and they eventually figured out how to make a perfect arc, which happened to like demonstrate some important ideas in geometry. And then like later on, a very smart person would like come along and be like, observe this and be like, oh, interesting.
Here's the mathematical scientific basis for that being true.
Yes, and then
it was discovered. Yeah,
we named the thing after like the egghead who put it into writing, which is great. Like that's a very important skill too.
Right.
But it's like this guy is like this. I think he's an engineer or an architect, and he's basically just like talking about how even like ancient people just like figured this stuff out by like doing. And it's like later on we can abstract some sort of like truth out of it and be like, oh, interesting. Like all of these apprentices know how to do X. And the reason that this works is like, oh, we could put that into a formula that's useful to teach to kids. Great. That's really cool. But like it came out of like thousands of years of just like work, like people just like working and making stuff,
Yeah. Okay. So this is really funny because I started like going into this conversation. The more I listened to Talking Businessly and like reading your content and posts and stuff, I realized like you and me, I think our perspective on the type of work that we do is like a Venn diagram. Like we have some differences, but like there's a lot of the ways that we think and approach product and engineering that is very similar. And you having this floating around your head is hilarious because it is also floating around in my head. So I was like curious just to see like what's the overlap in you and I's personality. I saw a tweet the other day that was a quote from, once again, should have done the research, but I didn't know research required. Y'all can look this up yourself. But the quote was basically like somebody observing about like the benefits of academics, which was just like, yes, everyone on a base level will be smarter but we're going to lose our excellence through
Hmm.
academics. And the reason is
Interesting.
exactly the reason you're saying, which is we are moving more and more formulaic into saying like this is how things are done, and
Hmm.
like you're going to remember these trodden pathways. And what got us those trodden pathways was not somebody in that time period
Right.
trotting well-known pathways. It was from explorers.
Yeah.
And like
Right.
academics uh, is hampering the number of explorers that we have in every generation in some ways. And like I don't know how true that is as like a general blanket statement, but I can see that in myself and I can see that in others where it is like so easy, especially like if you think about like product and design.
Hmm.
I attribute this to like finding like soul in a product a lot.
Hmm.
Like you get people who talk about scale, you get people who talk about like, well, like, and with like, engineers, like I need to build this in a way that like can handle millions of like requests a second, or like a design that's like this needs to be like scalable to a like a design org of like 100+ designers, and like you it's like the same with academics where it's like okay, we're trying to like scale things, create reusable things, create like pathways for things. And what you lose is the upside of like exploring something new and like unknown. And like, yes, there is more risk inherent with that of failing, but the upside of finding something no one else has done before and unlocking that is like so high. Like you've got to find time to do that for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because the way that I learned to write code was that we were working on a game, and games are hard. And Daniel was like, "I'll teach you to write code, but what we'll do is like once a week, I'll give you a hard task that's a little bit past what you're comfortable doing. You go try to do it, and then come back to me, and I'll code review it and tell you how I would have done it."
Mm.
Um, and in some ways it's like just it was the
Yeah.
perfect way to learn. I was joking about this on Blue Sky the other day, but it was like I accidentally wrote a second conference talk this week because I was
Saw
trying to
that.
like
So funny.
I was trying to punch up my Laracon talk, and I was like, oops, I just added 30 minutes. Oh, I guess this is a separate talk. But it's about this in some ways, because it's like, if you really think about it, this is how people learn stuff, and especially programmers. It's
Mm-hmm.
very obvious that this is how people learn stuff, but we forget that this is how people learn stuff. And
Yep.
the guiding metaphor, I guess, analogy, whatever, of the talk I want to give, which I want to title like "How to Get Good," is like this. So at jujitsu, I have this instructor who is really smart, and
Mm-hmm.
he basically teaches jujitsu differently from how everyone else teaches it. Most people, you go in and you spend 15 minutes like learning a piece of technique that'll be like really detailed, and then you like practice it with a partner. And then you go back and he's like, no, do this a little differently. Do this specific thing differently. You guys are getting this grip wrong. And then you go do it again, and then come back and he's like, and here's the next thing you do after that. And it's almost like learning a dance, you know? And it really is a great way to like download all of like the knowledge that exists about jujitsu into your brain, which is, there's something useful about that. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
useful. But what my instructor does instead is he's like, okay, Will, you're going to start on John's back. Obviously, John, your goal is to like get out of that because that's a very dangerous position and stand up. Will, your goal is to like retain the position and finish and like choke
Mm-hmm.
him. Go. And then we just like go. And like we have 3 minutes of you attacking and 3 minutes of me attacking. And then he comes back and he's like, okay, let's talk about some like broad principles of what's going on here.
Right. Yeah.
And he doesn't get into, I mean, he does sometimes, but he very rarely gets into like prescriptive, like you do this and then you do this and then you do
Yeah.
this.
This is the snake hold. This is how you break it. Like step
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
I
more
like that.
like, hey, he's like, hey, so I'm noticing a lot of people are like rolling over to their back to get off. This is not wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
here's the pros and cons of doing that. Okay, I'm noticing a lot of people trying to get out without actually breaking grips.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. You could do it that way. I don't prefer to, and here's why. Okay, let's do it again, and let's run it back, and then we
Mm-hmm.
just run it back, and we do that for like an hour. And the first couple times I
Oh,
went to these classes, I was like, I'm spending an hour stuck in this position that I'm really bad at. And he's like, yeah, exactly. Like, just keep on working it until like you and
mm-hmm.
your body
Mm-hmm.
understand what you're doing here, you know?
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is how higher education, in my opinion, should be done anyway. Like, it makes sense at like a younger
Mm.
age that you've got to like education is fantastic in that it teaches you like principles and basics in a formulaic way that like gives you a foundation for just being able to speak the language literally sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
like also
Mm-hmm.
just like mathematically and all that. But like there comes a point in which like you've got to be able to flip this switch like you're talking about, which is like, okay, well, now we're just going to put you in these positions that you've got to solve these problems and you're going to flounder, try a bunch of different ways, and then we'll talk about pros and cons of all the things I observed you trying to do versus like, hey, memorize these things. Man,
Yeah.
I love that. I talked about that actually with somebody um, today on Blue Sky as well. They were kind of talking about how they like to learn, and it was like, yeah, I don't do like the best thing for my career was having to learn by myself, and I was like, I
Mm.
agree in part. Like, I think for me, like I've got to learn on my own at first so that I get a lay of the land, and then I have formed my own opinions enough that I can get advice or like feedback from somebody else and
Mm.
know where to ask the right questions to get more out of that interaction.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so man, I love that. I love that. Okay, that was a good. That these are I need to have more people on. You're like the first like true guest that I've had on, and I'm I think this is going to be fun. So I need to do more of these because like
Good.
this is great. Give me another one. What you got?
All right. Well, where I'm trying to think of how to organize this. Do you want me to read a couple out and then you decide which ones you want to talk about, or how do you want to go through
Sure.
them?
Okay. Actually, I've got one. Let's see if any of these fall under this kind of like question that came to mind, which
Perfect.
is like, you are a game designer,
Mm.
board and computer game. It is something you're like passionate about and you enjoy.
Yeah.
Is that am I characterizing you correctly in that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you like for your day job, you are a like co-founder owner of a like web development agency, product development agency called Thunk.
Yeah.
How like do you have opinions on things that like because of like your passion and your experience in like game design and stuff, how that overlaps with like the work that you do at Thunk?
Yeah, it overlaps in some interesting ways. I mean, one is this was like the talk that I just gave that I've been talking a lot about this recently, just because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. But for anyone who's listening, I haven't met before. I run a agency with my good friend Daniel Colborn, and we make software. And the reason that agency exists is because we were making a game together, and the game did not work. And out of that, we created basically a really good software development team led by him because he's like a killer programmer. And I'm a product manager who was like kind of a more junior programmer. And then Jacob, who also works with us, was on the team as well. And so there just came a point where we're like, the three of us are like pretty good at making stuff together, and we could do this for money. And the game didn't make any money, but we could, our clients pay us money, and they're very happy with us. So that's like what at a fundamental level, it overlaps there because that's literally how it happened.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think like the product management is a lot about like just how to make things. And
what to make, like not only how to make things, but like what
yes.
the what behind
yes.
making them as well.
Yes. And like, why are you approaching it that way, and what matters here and what doesn't matter, and let's not waste time on stuff that doesn't matter, and let's have some sort of sane process for continuous improvement that's not burdensome, et cetera, et cetera. all of those things add up to like all of those things have made me better at making games, for sure. Because it's like I think product management is just like a really good broad set of principles that are like, you can have a product manager for a medical device in the same way that you could have a product manager for a software product, or a product manager for a Rubbermaid trash can or whatever. Like you can have it for anything, and that's because it's just like it's just a really broadly useful set of ideas and principles that are quite flexible. So making a game in some ways really no different. And so I think becoming a proficient product manager was extremely helpful, and then becoming a programmer, I think it really, really helps to think about ideas and models and structures and abstract terms, and think about like the logical relationships between things. And I think that has also made me a better game designer.
Yeah. Oh man, that last one I imagine is a big one. You said on one of your previous podcasts what felt like a good opinion that I held as well, which was like, you don't always need a product manager in your company, but your company is always product managing. Like,
yes.
Whether you have a product manager or not, like by nature of building a product, you're going to be doing some product management. Yeah. So like you need to learn, you either need to hire one or be one in some form. And like there are a lot of it's like the 80-20 rule, where there's a lot of like 80% of good you can get, like you can get 80% of the benefit from like a very small amount of just like product management thinking and approaching to your product, if you just like knew they existed.
Totally. It's in some ways this is not the right comparison exactly, but like one thing I think a lot of full stack developers know is that like you don't have to be a designer, but if you know some like super obvious design 101 stuff, you're just going to be like noticeably better out the gates. It's kind of like that. And I think like I think the point that I was making, which I joke about this all the time, is like, it's like, I have fully stolen this joke from this guy named Rusty Roof, and I need to start giving him credit.
Yes.
But it was interesting. This guy Rusty was this guy who he was like a big HR guy who like did this at like Pepsi and EA and these other companies like that. And I heard him giving a talk about company culture, and he was like, some of you might think like, oh, we don't do culture here. Like, we're not culture guys. We just do business. And he's like, trust me, your company has a culture. And if you're not like consciously thinking about that, that's like saying we don't do hygiene here. Like, oh, you're doing it.
Basic hygiene, right?
Yeah. Like you're doing it. You're just doing such a bad job that everyone knows you stink,
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about product management, where it's like, if you're making a thing, like you are necessarily making decisions about priority, roadmap. You just might be doing those things implicitly. And if you're doing them all implicitly, you're probably not doing a very good job.
Yeah, or you're getting very lucky, one or the other.
Yeah, or you're getting very lucky. Or just like your intuition is so good that you don't even have to consciously write it down, and you have a small enough team that that's not a problem. Like, that's a thing too. Sure.
Yeah.
I honestly think Taylor Otwell, for example, at Laravel, has just been like
such a fine-tuned intuition on like what makes good APIs and like a framework good.
And part of that is that he is the user, right? So like he had a tweet the other day about like, like you really shouldn't have to talk to customers that much. And it's like, well, yeah, in your case, that's true. Like you are the customer and you have like a pitch perfect intuition. Yes, that is true for you.
Yes. I saw somebody, he was like an interview, and they're like, hey, like if you could build anything else, what would you build? And he was just like, man, I don't know. I don't really have ideas. Like, I'm not an idea man. Like, I don't just come up with stuff. It's just like, I'm using this and I realize I need something. And so I make it because I need it. And I'm like, yep, There we go.
Yeah. And like that's totally valid. And I just think like most businesses are not that. And like his case is completely valid and it's great. And he is making priority decisions and scoping things down
Totally.
so that he can ship more often. He is doing all of that. It's just he's able to kind of do it all implicitly. But even now, as Laravel has continued to grow, I think they employ product managers now, because now it's like there's a big enough
the
team.
The scope is too wide to get his opinion on
Totally.
every tiny decision, for sure. Interesting. Well, cool. Okay. A follow-up question that I had related to that was like, have you ever found yourself in a trap, like between the two, where like I do this sometimes, where I'll like conflate learning something in one area and by trying to apply it. And this one's like one of those, like you might not, but like sometimes I'll run into like an issue where it's like, oh yeah, I learned this thing, let me try to apply it like here as well, and then it just like doesn't work.
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like one, like there are certain things. Actually, one of the things that came up in the conversation I had with Travis, where he was like, because this always comes up whenever I talk to software developers about the complexity of board games, is that they're all like people always jump to like, I wish you could just write tests, and I'm like, writing tests for a board game is like not really feasible. Like I guess I could do it, but at that point I would have like built out the entire back end logic of like how the board game works in a thing. That's an interesting area. I'm trying to think of other things. I mean, one place where like, I guess I'm slightly shoehorning one of my things in to answer your question.
Do it.
So
please do.
I'm going to sort of like orthogonally answer your question.
Look over there.
Like,
all right, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things I had written down, and I promise this relates, is distribution is harder than development, which is a generalization, and it's whatever. But one thing is that I was product manager at two different companies. One of them was an early stage startup that failed, where I was like I was working really closely with the business development guy, and so like we were going around and talking to all the early customers to get them to adopt the thing. But like I was like on payroll working with someone who was really competent at BD and kind of like following him around and like and working together, and like that was a really good experience. But then like we did sell it to some early customers, and it was like thrilling and really it's exciting. And then the second company I worked at just had like, I was there for like over 3 years, and they had like a killer sales team. They were just like crushing it, and they were so good at like finding relationships, developing the relationships, getting it out there and selling it. And I would join on some of their calls. But like I kind of let those muscles atrophy for a while. And they would like give me requirements. They're like, oh yeah, this big client is going to come in, but they need XYZ. And then we'd like kind of work together to like, that was the extent of my interaction with, with some of the sales stuff. And it kind of made me forget for a little bit that distribution is like the whole game. Like if you are a software developer sitting at home, as I've been a number of times, and said, I hate XYZ, I'm going to build a better version. Like, yeah, you probably can like pretty fast. It's like not that hard. Like building software in 2024 is like not that hard.
I've got a big topic on that one for sure.
And it's like, yeah, you could build whatever. Like I did this recently where I was like, no one tracks problems the exact way that I like to do it. And so I built this thing called Paper Cuts to do it. And I'm really happy with it. I use it every day. I basically built a product for myself because I was like,
right.
there's a product that is not out on the market. I'm going to try to build it. And then we had this kind of like flight of fancy conversation about like, oh, maybe we should like, try to sell this thing. And and again, it's just, I forgot for a second that like, yeah, building it is easy. Building the exact thing that you want.
Having some personal opinions on how something should be done is not hard.
Right. Yeah.
Finding people with the same opinions and finding the people who hold the same opinions as you.
Yeah.
And getting this in front of them enough times that they're like, oh, I do actually want that is.
Yes.
Oof.
And I think it's like, I think there's a thing where software developers are are kind of malign the sales guys and the marketing people. And like, sure, fair enough, because like a lot of those people are douchebags. But but they're like, they do something that the rest of the company can't do. And if they didn't do it, the company doesn't exist.
Yes. I mean, distribution is the hardest part. And there are people who are like clearly like very talented at it. And it's really easy to know when somebody like built something without thinking how they were going to sell something. And they're like, why does the phrase build it and they will come is just not true.
Yeah.
There is this, so there's like this phrase that I've been noodling on, this opinion, which is like software is saturated. Like software is really saturated now. And that's like why distribution's so hard, because it used to be like, it's hard to like evolve with a market. Because like so many times you want to do like best practices, or like do the things that people are preaching about that just work. And for the longest time, like as software like specifically SaaS was becoming a thing, like you could just build a SaaS and like you were like one of maybe two people solving that problem. And you could just like, people would just come and find you because like they were searching for the solution and like you were the only person solving it. But like now, for every problem, there are like dozens, sometimes like way more than that, solutions for like every market that you could be getting into. Like somebody's already built something in it and is solving that problem. So like now, like you're saying, like now it's so much more. And like you run into that with the game industry, probably like people in the game industry already know that, because like games have been around a lot longer than software. So like the distribution thing, I'm sure, is getting harder, but like has been hard for probably a pretty long time.
Yeah.
Just because it's so saturated.
Totally. And I think that's right. And it's, I guess that, so to answer the original question, I guess, like, I think, what I have a huge amount of confidence in is like managing the development of something that's good.
Right.
And I'm like, I can do that. I know how to do that. And when I went to go make a software product that was like, I'm going to go scratch my own itch. I'm going to do what Taylor did and just be like, I'm going to make something that just works for me. I did it and I made paper cuts and I was like, I freaking love this thing. I'm so proud of it. But then I was like, oh, right. Like there's this whole other part of the equation, which is like actually like marketing it and selling it. And if I'm working with a talented team of people, which I've always worked with really good salespeople, then it's like, well, great. The thing that I made that's good is being bought. And in the case of like paper cuts, I'm like, well, I don't really have the time or energy to go sell this thing. And we are not going to like hire a makeshift sales team to go put it out there. So like, we don't have customers, and that's like, okay. Right. Like I'm kind of at peace with it, because it is like, it's just not really, that wasn't really the goal with it, but it was a good slap in the face reminder of like, yeah, dude, like building this thing was not the hard part. And so similarly with the game, I made a board game, and I just talked I guess with Daniel and Travis each recently about this, but like it was a good reminder there that like, yeah, you made this game, people like it, everyone you give it to is like, oh, great, this is awesome. And like the Kickstarter went well, and I've been able to sell enough that it, broke even. But it's like, yeah, now there's this whole other problem, which is like, put this thing into people's hands, get it into stores, get it onto shelves. And it's like, that's so hard that big businesses exist to solve that problem. It's like, that's not right. It's not trivial. Right. It's not like you just make a game and then it's in everyone's hands,
Yeah. I feel like it's the same with like creating anything. Like if the goal is to sell, like with books, you hear this a lot, like the self-publishing, like there's a reason publishers exist, and like why you make less. It's because like you are handing over some of the upside to make sure that you reach a larger audience with like the stuff that you're creating. And like that's like the same idea as like a sales org in some sense, which is just like, yeah, you're gonna spend a lot more money to hopefully reach a much broader audience. Cool.
It's funny just learning these things from first principles, because there was like this moment where I was like, it's like, oh, it's almost as if I need someone who already has relationships with every board game store in the world and has a large catalog of games to sell and can.
Man, if only there was
find me the right oh, okay. This was the publisher that I didn't reach out to 12 months ago. Got it. Okay.
That is so funny. And I feel like that's like it's like a kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like the learning style, which is just like sometimes to really learn something, like you do have to just like learn it for yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's like some people have a really good skill of just being able to like not have to go to the school of hard knocks, but I've never been that person.
Yeah.
All right, hit me with another opinion. What you got on your list? And then I've got one after this that I want to ask you about. So I think probably by then we'll get close to wrap it.
I'll rapid fire through a couple that I don't actually want to talk about. I just thought they were funny to write down.
Better.
I went to 2 different concerts this week, which was a bit random. I don't always do that.
2 in 1 week.
I know, it was very exciting. And I decided encores are stupid. I don't think I have to say a lot more than that. Just play all the songs you intend to play. And
play them all.
It.
You already know you're going to fake walk off the stage, wait for people to, like, then the audience has to be like, okay, we've got to, like, play into this whole song and dance, clap for a while till they show up.
Yes. Okay, related.
Good opinion.
I think this is one that we could spend an hour on, but I just don't think we need to. I mean, you can tell me whether you want to go deeper on this or not.
Cool.
I think the like framework wars of Twitter are completely fake and meaningless, and I think that they are mainly driven by people who are not shipping, because why would anyone care what anyone else uses to code? I just like learned React for a project, and it was fun and delightful, and I was like, oh cool, they're solving all the same problems that I need to solve when I normally write stuff with Livewire and Alpine. Cool. I learned some new techniques. They made me think a little differently about it. Maybe I'll go back to it in the future. Who cares? And who cares who else is using this? Everything is great. We're all basically working on the same stuff. If you're shipping, that's awesome. If you're not shipping, go get back to shipping.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about this for an hour.
Okay.
I 100% agree. Like, that is a strong opinion that I will strongly hold. Like, no weakness about it. Like, the only time that a technology decision matters in like what you're going to use to build something is when it decides when you're actually building something, and like you're also trying to factor in like the future and culture of your company. Because like one thing I do believe is like it doesn't matter what you write anything in personally, as long as you are competent and can get it built. It does matter when you're going to be building a team and a culture around something for a long period of time, only because like there are differences in ethos for like frameworks, based on like what those frameworks hold to be like important in the community. And like you can kind of get a vibe for that pretty much like without having to do too much work. Like the ethos of Rails community is different than the ethos of the Laravel community and the JavaScript community and the like Elixir, like functional programming community. Like all of the type of people that you will be working with and the ways that they approach problem solving are going to be different. So like when you're starting a new project that you know you're going to have to hire people for over a longer period of time, then the technology matters, because like that decides the type of people you're going to be working with and like the way that y'all solve problems. So like to me that is the only time it matters. When it does not matter is when you're like worrying about like some other indie hacker who is trying to build something or trying to build some business. Like who cares what technology another business is using?
Right.
It only matters when it's your business, and it's because you're trying to like form like a specific like culture and approach to your product.
Yeah, and I think it actually does, I realize, relate to the initial topic of this, which is just like I'm distinguishing in my mind between like the people who are just like maniacally shipping cool things, and like the commentariat, like the commentating class.
Oh, I
and
love
I'm like
the commentariat.
like,
that is
I'm just
officially
like, not
a new
interested.
thing. I'm writing this one down.
Yeah. All right, other ones that I have. You stop me anywhere. I'll stop in on any of these that you want. You get to pick the last one. Okay.
Like
people don't
show.
know what. Yeah. Here we go. I think I've got 4 here. People don't know what free speech means. Most productivity tools are fake, and everything should really just be documents and spreadsheets.
Saw that one recently. That was a good one.
People should embrace snobbery because life is way too short for mediocre stuff.
Okay.
And finally, changing your mind is a virtue, but most people most of the time don't want to, and you should not waste your time trying to change other people's minds because they're not really listening.
Interesting. Okay. So the one I think I like the most is the third one, the snobbery.
Okay, great.
I like that one. I like that one because like I'm very much a like salt of the earth is like what people use to like phrase things when they just mean like I don't know enough to be a snob. You know, like, oh yeah, like I've not done enough things to like have an opinion on that until recently. Like I recently like on like one very specific topic, I started losing weight about like a year and some change ago. I've lost like 115 pounds. And
Whoa,
like
seriously?
Like as a result of that. Thank you. As a result of that, like I've cooked a whole lot of meat, like a whole lot of steak, a whole lot of chicken, like a bunch of protein, like cuz that's like my approach was like go heavy on protein.
Yeah.
And like as long as you're like protein focused, you get filled up pretty fast and you don't really want to be eating a bunch of other stuff too. So, anyway. So like because of that, like I cooked a lot of different stuff, a lot of different ways, and like I now have like very like now I'm just like I don't want to eat that. Like I'm going to cook it. Like I now like this very specific thing, cook this very specific way using this technique. And like yes, I know like you might not have this. I saw somebody else talk about this too, where they're just like yeah, like I have a sous vide and I love using it, and like every man doesn't have a sous vide, but and like I can't go on Reddit and talk about like these things with people because like then people are just like, what do you mean you have that? Like I could cook a steak for like $5, blah blah.
Right.
So it's like, but like no, like I understand that, but like I care about this because it is like literally part of every day of my life. So like I've recently had like a very strong opinion about that same shape, but like what got you thinking about that?
Well, I mean that's a good example because like we eat, you like it or not, you're going to eat a whole lot of food in your life, and it like men are particularly insufferable about this, where they're like, I couldn't cook anything if I wanted to. Oh, don't set me loose in the kitchen. I'm like. Do you understand how much better your life would be if you spent like literally even 3 hours like watching YouTube videos about how to cook? Like, like how much better your life would be if you just like embraced this. Anyway, so food is a great example. The thing that got me going on it was I got like I don't think of myself really as like a cinephile or a movie buff or anything. Like I like movies a lot. And I am not like I don't want to give the impression that I'm out here like watching like deep cryptic black and white foreign films every day, like you know, but like I like good movies, and because I'm just like busy and I'm engaged to be married and I spend a lot of time with my family and whatever, and you know, work out. It's like I don't even have kids yet, but I'm like time is quite limited, and so at the end of the day, when I turn something on, I'm like, I have this giant list of movies that I want to get through. And like, there's like thousands of really good movies that I haven't seen. Right. And I will talk to people about what they're watching, and people will be like, oh, you should watch this new Netflix show. And, you know, I'm like, is it good? And they're like, well, you know, season 1 is like, okay. And then like seasons 2 through 3 are terrible. And then season 4 is like kind of interesting again, and I'm like,
how did you get to season 4?
Yeah, I'm like, are you insane? Like, do you understand that your time on Earth is limited and that you're going to die one day? Like, how are you spending your life like that? Like, it makes me crazy.
Yes.
It really makes me crazy. And I'm like, do you understand? So like Stanley Kubrick, like one of the undisputed goats, like he only made like 10 movies. If you want to watch every Stanley Kubrick movie back to back, that's like 26 hours. That's 2 seasons of TV. Like, why not watch every Stanley Kubrick movie? Or like, and I'm not saying you have to go watch like heavy, intense stuff. Like, watch Goodfellas, watch Scorsese movies, like watch whatever, like, or watch like even like Ocean's 11 or something. Like it doesn't have to be sort of like high art, but like
right.
For goodness sake, like watch something. Like there's so much good stuff out there. Why are you like? It seems like people are just like drooling at the mouth watching just these awful streaming shows that they don't even like. And when I bring this up, people are like, someone said this to me this past week, and they were like, "Wow, John, you must be such a cinephile." And they said it with that little bit of like snark in their voice, and I'm like. Yeah, how dare I want to watch good movies? Like, what are you, crazy?
How dare you not want to waste your time?
Yeah.
And especially when you think about it, like a whole season of TV is so much time. Like,
it's
so much time. Okay,
yeah.
so I've got one. My wife, Allie, you may know her from like my comments on Twitter.
Yeah, it's
always
making
fun
on Twitter.
of me. So yeah, I'm gonna roast her back for just a second.
Perfect.
Which I don't ever do, but we'll see if she listens, and we'll find out probably pretty quickly. She has like I think I heard you say something about like you'd much rather watch a movie than a TV show.
Yeah.
She's the exact opposite. Like she hates movies. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me why she doesn't like movies. She's told me why. Like I could tell you why she says she doesn't like them. But it's like, but she loves TV shows. Like, give me a TV show, and then I'll be like, but Allie, like you'll binge watch like 4 episodes of something that will then end up being either somewhere between, at a minimum, like 2 hours to a maximum of like 4 hours plus. And then you'll be like, but a movie's too long.
Yes.
Like,
and I totally get that too.
Like a movie may be long, but like you get the full story arc of like an entire, like, you get the opening, you get the build, and you get the climax and the finish and the resolution, all of it in a single sitting. Whereas like a TV show, I mean, I think that's why they get you. It's just like nothing ever resolves. So you're just like,
the business model
gotta
hurts
watch
it.
Another one.
Yeah, the business model totally jams it up. Like, and I've had this before where like you get into like the second season of a show, and they're like, oh, by the way, like, did you know that this like side character is in like a terrible domestic situation? You're like, oh, I didn't. Oh gosh, no.
Suddenly, I really
Awful.
care about this.
Yeah, and they're like, well, it's still not resolved. I was like,
yes.
I remember
okay.
I was, yeah.
Have you ever watched The Bear?
I don't like that at all. Yeah.
Okay. Big fan of The Bear. Like of TV shows like that. Like if I had to pick top, it'd be like The Bear, Newsroom. From HBO, like Sherlock. Some of these, like these are the type of shows where I'm just like, oh man, these are the greats. Like, but like season 3 of The Bear, I think hurt because of the exact thing that you're talking about, which was they decided to go on every side quest and never resolved anything by the end of the show, to where like everyone's opinion on season 3 was like nothing happened. You filmed a whole lot of really great, like. It's very artistic.
It was
like
beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's very well done. But like everyone's frustrated because nothing resolved, and I sat through all of this stuff. Like the one thing people want to know just like simmered the entire time.
Yeah, it's really it's kind of crazy making to me. And I do, and I get it too. I mean, we Lindsay and I are in the middle of some shows, and like we had that the other night actually, where we were like, I was like, I don't think I have a whole movie in me, and then we turned on The Wire and watched like 3 episodes, and I was like, that was weird. We just spent 3 hours. We could have watched, like a really long movie. Actually,
my wife's a kindergarten teacher, which is just like mentally exhausting. And so we are watching The Diplomat right now on Netflix, which is a fantastic show. I really like that one because it's like very deep, and like the way I described it to somebody was like, they don't hold your hand. They just go and you got to keep up. Like they don't re-explain things. They don't try to connect the dots for you. It's like, no, like they're saying something in season 2, episode 2 that happened in season 4, episode 4, like season 1, episode 4. And like, you've just got to like remember and have paid attention. So like that, I love that because they're like, no, you're all adults. And then the exact, so like on nights there's basically like, we get the mood from each other of like, okay, like, was today a really hard day at school? Like kindergartners can be rough. Like how mentally drained are you?
Yeah,
and it's
totally.
like, do we need to rewatch like an episode of Parks and Rec tonight so you can just like mentally relax? Or like, do we watch The Diplomat where it's like, you got to be like focused in? So it's like what you say, where it's like, like you might watch the same time, but like your brain is not there. Like you're using that as like a form of like meditation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think my just point about that is like I think that there was some time in our culture, I don't know, I've had it too, where I'm like, oh, don't be a snob, you know. Oh, that's like the worst thing you could be, as a snob. And I'm like, give me a break. Like you know the difference between good and bad, and I don't think you need to like go live your life at an art museum, but like embracing good stuff and saying, no, I'm actually
having
not
opinions
gonna watch.
on good stuff. Like having opinions that something can be bad is okay. Like, you're allowed to say things suck.
assessing Love Island and saying, you know what, I'm actually not going to watch I'm actually not going to use my life, my precious hours left on this earth. I'm not going to use those watching Love Island.
Yes.
Before
we watch this show, let me just show you this one piece of paper that shows you every weekend you have left in your life. And then let's reassess if you want to watch this right now. That's funny. Okay. Well, I've got to probably wrap it up here soon. There was one more thing that I wanted to ask you that we may not have time to like fully cover, but like whether or not this gets answered here or is like something that you just now know I want to like discuss with you in the future. Is you said this thing that happened when you were working on one of your games where you got to a point where you knew all the problems in the game. Like you knew the full game, you knew all the problems that were with its current iteration. And so you thought, I'm just going to redesign the game now with all of this knowledge, and basically made a new game and lost all the magic of the original game. And that concept just like hit. And I was just like, oh man, like I think a bunch of people need to hear that. Like that is such a good, like such a cautionary tale just in general, in like whether it's game design or like software, like that idea that you can do that, where it's like you have this hubris of like, oh, well now I know all the problems, so I'm going to redo what was existing to solve those problems, and then losing what made it special along the way.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. It's also a super interesting time for you to ask that question, because earlier today, I just put up on Blue Sky a picture of this very game, which we are now about to go do a prototype of, because we started working on it like over 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago, and then dropped off for a few years. And in the middle of that, we like came back and we were like, we think we know everything that's wrong with this game, and tried to just like piecemeal it back together with new rules. And we were like, this is completely different, like you said. But it made us actually walk away from the game partly for a while. I mean, there's a number of factors there, but we came back recently and we're just like, what was it about? Like, I think what that experience helped us to do was it helped us to then describe the magic. The component parts that make up something, if you kind of like mix them all around and restructure them, you do not have the original thing anymore. And when we did that, it was a real eye-opening moment for us to realize that. But I think more importantly, what it really prompted us to do was to go back and say, if we just lost, I'm doing giant air quotes, the magic, what was the magic?
What was the
Let's
magic?
put words to it. Yeah. And we realized that like there are these parts of the game, for example, of like we're like, well, the original felt like you were exploring a world, and it no longer feels like that. Like whatever we do, we need to make sure that's part of it, or whatever. There were a number of things. We wrote out a list of things like that were like, hold on, like what was the stuff we were taking for granted that is now missing, and we are sad that it's missing. And we came back and like actually kind of like reverted a version, which is also, as a side note, I've started keeping track of like my board game rules, and like there's a ton of cards and stuff. I have it all in GitHub, and I like make pull requests into the rule book for myself. And
I love that. So it's all versioned.
Yeah, and like the cards are just these like really long JSON files, and which is also nice because then I can like import it into Figma and stuff to make prototypes. But it's really interesting because I can like actually like, it's like, okay, let's like literally revert a version and be like, how do we get back to where we still had magic? Now, like, let's solve these problems in a different way, which is super interesting.
Okay. That's really, okay, so what I love about that was like, when I originally heard you say that, the instinct that I had was like, okay, don't redesign things. Like don't redo an entire thing. But to me, like, what you're saying from that is actually like doing that was good, because before we didn't know what the magic was, but when we lost it, we were able to actually like pinpoint what was special about it. So like It's almost like the reverse, which goes back to like what we were talking about earlier, like at the start of this, which might be a nice little bow on top of this, which is like you have to do stuff. So by redoing, you might get things wrong, but like now you can, like, by redoing that game because of good intentions, like there are these problems, let's try to solve the game now again, knowing these problems at the end. Then you lose something along the way. Now you can iterate again to say like, okay, we solved those problems, but we lost this. Now we know what that is. So it's like you iterate forward instead of like getting mired and stuck, afraid to lose something that you have. Like, just because you have something that's working, and the lesson is not like don't break it. The lesson is like break it so you can know what breaks. Like that. That's not the right wording for it, but it's like don't be afraid to break
totally
things,
right.
Because then like you uncover what made it work in the first place. If you don't already know that, which is sometimes a lot of the case for like software that like slowly evolves in a market over time. Like suddenly you have a product with a bunch of customers that they like, and you don't always know exactly what it is. Like it's just like this amorphous blob of like, well, people like this thing we've made, but it's really hard to like pinpoint the details of like, how can we still improve this while still keeping what people like about it? We'll start changing things and talk to users about those changes, and you'll quickly find out what was great about it in the first place.
Yeah, and I think if you have, this gets at like, I mean, the other talk that I want to do is basically all about how this is all safe and well and good as long as you have basically a retro and review process, which I think is the only meeting that's actually non-negotiable, is like just retro everything. And it's like, because then you have a safe context in which you can try something new and then go, well, now we're talking about it in the retro and everyone agrees the magic is gone. Let's try it again next week. Let's try it again next week. Let's try it again next week. Just stay in motion. Yeah. So
good. Well, I think that wraps it up. We've got to head to the doctor here soon. With Palmer, you want to come say hey? Can you say hey to Mr. John?
Hi.
Hi, Palmer. How are you?
He said, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. We've been better. A little sick today, but
sorry to hear.
Appreciate you coming on today, John. It was great to meet and get to hang out. We'll go ahead and wrap things up here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you.
Absolutely. See ya.
Bye.